Hello, viewers. You may wonder, would I want to read a book about Detroit and sports and history? Not just Detroit sports history? Well, the answer is yes, you should. And I read a book and I'm here to talk about it today. Here's the book introduction. So, anyways, the book is City of Champions, A History of Triumph and Defeat in Detroit, and it's by Stefan, I'm probably going to butcher this last name, Ziemansky, and Sok Maria Weineck. Apparently, the main author, or I guess maybe they're co-authors, but the one who has top billing, for lack of a better term, he also wrote Soccernomics, so I thought that was kind of cool. Isn't really why I bought the book from the bookstore in Detroit I was in when I purchased it, but I did think it was interesting. And so I will say this book's pretty good. I quite liked it quite a bit. I'll kind of go over the rubric stuff here in a second, but there was just a lot I kind of like figured out from this book that I didn't always realize before. Like, I think when a lot of people think of Detroit sports, they kind of think of, like, at least when I think of, like, recent times, like, the Tigers not making the World Series with what some sports writers argue is the best team ever to not make the World Series and win it. And then I think of, like, the Malice at the Palace and all that stuff. And let's see what else I think of. Then I think of, like, the 2004 and the kind of mid 2000s Detroit Pistons is probably the first three things I think of. And then I also think of the long playoff run of the Red Wings that they unfortunately are not doing anymore. But anyways, I think now I'll kind of go over the rubric that I kind of made up for the book. So let me get out my notes here. So like I said, the first one is just a general, did I like it? I would lean towards a strong yes in this case. So I kind of went over some pros and cons of the book as well. So the pros is kind of like I hinted at in the kind of like my little spiel at the beginning. It goes over a lot of the major sporting events in the city's history. And it also goes over some ones that maybe people don't know about as well. I guess maybe this goes into my second point. I guess maybe I'll just say it that way. So it talks about a lot of the major events, like pretty much all the major league sports teams are mentioned. And then also talks about like kind of things like maybe people don't always know about, like Detroit City FC. And apparently Detroit was trying for like a long, long time to get an Olympics team. Not an Olympics team, excuse me. An Olympics, the Olympics to come and for them to be the host city for it. I don't think I knew that was a thing. I don't think I realized how much effort was put into it. So that was kind of interesting to see. So that's kind of two pros right there. And then in addition to that, I think it's just kind of an accessible introduction to the history of the region because it kind of covers a lot of different stuff. Like Detroit, like arguably the United States as well, has some systemic issues, and those are kind of talked about in the book as well. There's also like it mentions like its triumphs and defeats. So like good things are mentioned, bad things are mentioned, some social commentary kind of mixed in there. Like I said, I generally quite liked this book, so I would lean towards a strong yes. There are a couple cons I kind of think I should note, however. With the amount of time that was spent, like there are a few chapters that talk about kind of like some of the Olympic attempts and planning to get the games to come to the city. I felt like some of that could have maybe been used, like, or maybe just kind of put in one chapter and maybe they could have talked about some other events and communities that happen. Like, kind of on a sports related note, I'm kind of surprised given the authorship of the author, one of the authors for another book, that the fact that Detroit has had factory teams, I believe, that made the Open Cup finals a couple times. It's not mentioned at all. Like other factory teams from factories are mentioned in other regards, but they didn't really have a whole lot of. I mean, I don't really know, they didn't, like I said, they didn't talk about it very much, but I didn't seem like they had like strong like kind of success on like a national stage. Whereas like if you make the Open Cup final in the United States, that's pretty good. Even if you don't win it, like that's saying something. And that's not really mentioned at all in the book. I just kind of looked it up like kind of randomly on a fly, and I was like, wow, I did not know that. And then there's also kind of the point of there's some communities that aren't really mentioned in the book And if they are, they're mentioned briefly to the point where I don't recall them being mentioned in depth. So Detroit, and like especially Dearborn in particular in the Detroit area, has a large Middle Eastern and Muslim community. They aren't talked a whole lot about in this book, and that kind of surprised me given kind of like the amount of cultural influence they have in the region. The fact that, like, I mean, you can find like shawarma, other Middle Eastern food in a lot of places in Detroit and the surrounding area. There's quite a few Middle Eastern restaurants I like to frequent when I'm up there. And then also, a lot of the pro sports teams have like a Middle Eastern or Muslim heritage night. I don't know. I'm a little surprised that that was left out. And even then, like, not even just that group of people, not even just that group of people, but like other immigrant groups too, like Hispanics. They have quite a large presence in the city. Maybe not as much at some points in the city's history, but I'd say now there's quite a bit more. And like this book isn't that old. Like I remember, I think I think they first mentioned was the year I happened to see you could get street tacos at a Detroit Tigers game, and I think that's saying something because it seemed like kind of like the cultural impetus of immigrant groups kind of on the rise in the city at that time, but they don't really get a whole lot of mention in this book either. And then I already mentioned the Open Cup, and then that kind of goes into like the one point of like there were some things that maybe could have been covered that they chose not to, but they cover the Olympics a lot for some reason. And then also, this is maybe just a personal con, maybe not a major con, maybe for everyone. But I thought they went to quite great lengths to defend Ty Cobb in the book. And I mean, granted, he is a pretty good athlete. I don't think there's really any questioning that. They also they kind of went beyond that because I think sometimes there's like people who say like, oh well, he wasn't very popular and his teammates hated him, and like I think like people, the historical record kind of is mixed on that, I guess. I mean, it seems like it's maybe more strong one way than the other, but I guess maybe there's some mixed opinions on that I kind of found out in the book. However, they also try to kind of defend his character a bit, and I found that kind of surprising because the guy had like Ty Cobb, the guy, he had like kind of court cases, kind of like court cases in regards to like him like assaulting people and stuff like that, and just generally not being like the nicest character. And like I don't want to judge a guy on historical merits or anything as much as the next guy does, but I feel like if you're catching court cases somewhat frequently, you're probably not the best of people. Just my opinion. Don't quote me on anything I said there. But that's just kind of how I feel about it. And as much time as it's spent on Ty Cobb, they probably could have included some other things too that maybe would have been better and more kind of about the local history, I think. So that kind of goes into the kind of like yes/no scale. And here's the historical fighting time. So, did it make me want to fight Harry Bennett, who was mentioned in this book a few times? Yes. And now for the to learn or not to learn, and am I going to work scales? So, as far as the to learn or not to learn, like I said, this book, I learned quite a bit in this book, and I think I even learned some things even throughout like kind of doing research for this episode that I didn't know about. So I'm going to put it like a 4.5 out of 5, so that's pretty strong. It wasn't like I learned everything, but it's pretty close to that. And then the am I going to work scale, I kind of put it in the middle at like a 2.5 because as far as I could tell, the book is relatively accessible. It's not like super easy to read, but it's not super hard to read either. And like I just feel like it's generally kind of like a mid-range book, so I put it at 2.5. As far as the education and entertainment spectrum, I kind of put it kind of closer to if you remember, there's kind of like the little X and Y axis of like this is kind of like more entertaining, or no, sorry, more educational goes this way, more entertaining kind of goes down. I kind of put it closer to like the more educational side than the entertaining side, so it's kind of in that bottom left, for lack of a better term. Yeah, it's in the bottom left on here as well in my notes. So yeah, like it was definitely kind of a more educational book. It was entertaining as well, but I don't think I would read it like just because I thought it was a fun book to read. And yeah, so yes, that is kind of what I wanted to talk about for The City of Champions, A History of Triumph and Defeat in Detroit. Feel free to read it if you'd like. Maybe tell me other things maybe you thought about it that I didn't think of. So yeah, I guess tune in next time for the next video I post.